The reason I wrote Broken Benefits, What's Gone Wrong with Welfare Reform, is because since 2010, the social security system has gone through probably the biggest upheaval since the modern welfare state was introduced in the late 1940s. The combination of big reforms to disability benefits such as personal independence payment and of course the introduction of universal credit, a massive reform that brings together a number of different benefits, combined with huge austerity measures that cut benefits both in the old system and in the new ones, means that I think for a lot of people there's a lot of confusion about what's happened, and I wanted to kind of correct some myths, work my way through some of the complexities of the system, and get to the real truth about what's happened with welfare reform and why it feels like it's all gone so wrong. The main problems with universal credit, I think, fall into two broad categories. One is the administration, the way it's working for claimants in terms of the complexity of making claims and the difficulty in actually getting payments made to people. And the second is the amount of benefit that's received. So some groups being very heavily affected by kind of reductions in support. So on the first, there's obviously a massive problem with the waiting periods for an initial payment. Is at the moment 6 weeks. Recent changes bring it down to 5 weeks, but that's still a very long time for people to be waiting to get their first payment, often with nothing to live on in the interim. And the solution of providing kind of an advance payment, effectively a loan of your benefit entitlement in advance, just means that people get into debt right from the start of their claim, which is no solution really at all. And there are other problems with the administration of the system as well. So, for example, if people claim at the wrong time, they can be waiting even longer for their first payment of benefit, because if they lose their job, they make a claim and then they are paid their final payment from their employer of their earnings, then that final payment from their employer can fall within their first what's known as an assessment period for their universal credit entitlement, meaning that they don't get any universal credit at the end of that first month either. So they could be waiting rather than 5 weeks, waiting 9 weeks for their first payment of universal credit, just because they made their claim at the wrong time, as it were. So there are big problems with the administration of the system, but there are problems with the amount of support that's being provided as well. So some groups being particularly heavily affected. So for example, disabled people, particularly single disabled people without a carer, are losing an entitlement currently known as the severe disability premium, which is worth around £3,000 a year and is intended to help severely disabled people cover the costs of caring for themselves, which would otherwise be provided by a carer or a partner. And I'm really worried that some of this group of claimants are amongst the most disadvantaged and often some of the most socially isolated as well, and are seeing some of their support fall the very most. But also support being reduced for certain groups of older people. So for example, rules within universal credit mean that if you've got a couple with one partner over state pension age and the other under state pension age, for the purposes of universal credit, effectively they're both treated as under state pension age, which could massively affect their entitlement. In some cases, pensioner couples or old couples who are older people could lose as much as £10,000 a year because they're treated as working age rather than treated as pensioners.